Happy New Year 2015, everybody. I thought we'd kick it off, the year that is, by taking a look at a very interesting offering from Columbia River Knife and Tool Company, CRKT. What's in this box? 345 of 525. K280 TXP Onion Hi Jinx, product of Italy. What? Really? This ought to be interesting. Not made in China, not made in Taiwan, made in Italy. Stick with me, guys. We'll see what's inside the box and talk about it a lot. Hi gang, Rob here. It is the morning of 1 January 2015. Yes, the morning of New Year's Day. Up early, doing knife reviews, and probably some modifications as the day goes on. What we have here, and most of you who are watching this video probably already know, is a very ambitious effort by CRKT, Columbia River Knife and Tool, a 525 piece run of a Ken Onion design knife made by Lionsteel in Italy. CRKT has made a decision, the purveyor of mostly Chinese, some Taiwanese sub-$100 knives, to venture into the high-end production knife market. And here's what they came up with. After a year or two of association with vaunted designer Ken Onion, we get this thing. Comes in a rather nice box with a really nice leather pouch. Folds over and ties. Little pocket for the knife. I'm going to show you this up close. Embossed with the CRKT logo. And here's the knife. Just take a slow roll over it for you. What we're talking about, some specifications right out of the gate. We have a 3.312 inch blade, 3 5/16, fashioned of Sleipner steel. Most of us have become familiar with Sleipner, used a lot by Lionsteel in manufacture. Sort of a more rust resistant emulator of D2. The handle length 4.75 inches, 4 3/4. Overall length doesn't quite add up to the handle and blade just because of some differences in angles. 9 inches in overall length. Blade thickness 5 millimeters, 196 thousandths of an inch. Handle thickness is 0.55 inches. Handle material is, of course, the 6AL4V titanium. The suspension system on this knife, can you see it? Yeah, there you go. IKBS. Ball bearing system. The lock is a titanium frame lock with no stainless steel insert. I would imagine it's been carbidized by Lionsteel. They carbonize even their steel inserted lock interfaces, so I would imagine this one is as well. Deployment by flipper only. No thumb stud, no round hole, just the flipper. The clip is familiar to most of us who are Lionsteel folks. Same clip they use in the SR series of their own branded knives. It's just a beautifully functional and minimalistic low ride butt mounted clip that goes either left or right, tip up. Great retention. Pretty easy to get in and out of pocket for a deep carry clip. Kind of hard to tell on this knife because of the swale milled into the titanium, but the clip has excellent retention and does not actually touch the surface of the titanium. I think you can see the little bit of movement there. So when you swap it from side to side, this is probably pertinent only to lefties. You don't leave a mark on the side you took it off of, which is kind of cool. Okay, let's talk about this blade. We have, what would we call this, guys? A modified sheep's foot. Super functional utility blade shape. You see this in the Chris Reeve Sebenza in Singos. You see it in, well, you saw it in an old Ken Onion design, didn't you? In a much more svelte form. The old Leek had a blade profile very similar to this. It's a great utility shape. Wouldn't call it a tactical shape, not much for piercing, but a great user shape, especially for work that's going to be done, you know, on a cutting board or a surface. Just enough belly to rock through that work if you're using it for food preparation or something. The curious thing about that, though, is the presence of a flipper. That kind of gets in the way for work like that. You don't see any cuts in my leather. But it is what it is. 2014, 2015. Got to have ball bearings and flippers to be a knife, don't you? Well, I don't think so, but apparently that's what people think. Okay. We've got a flat ground blade from about 2/3 of the breadth of the blade down. It does terminate in a pretty thin profile behind the edge. This one's still wearing its factory edge. There's a reason for that, which we'll get to later in the video. There's some work to be done here. Each knife is numbered individually. This is number 345 of 525 on the back side of the knife, which is the show side for a lefty. The name of the knife, Hi Jinx, and then Ken Onion Design. And then on the show side for a righty, back side for a lefty, which we've got this big brash block letter CRKT logo. Frankly, I'm happy to be a lefty. I think the left side of the knife, or the show side for a lefty, is better looking than the other side. We have an over travel stop built into this pivot, the collar, around the custom pivot screw. Acts as an over travel stop for the lock bar. Kind of cool. The relief cut in the lock bar is on the inside of this knife, which gives you a very nice sleek appearance on the lock side of the knife, which I appreciate. No glass breaker on this one, just a nice terraced hold down screw for the pocket clip. The clip is attached in this very openly constructed knife to a barrel that has two flats on it to mate up with either side of the handle, secured by this body screw from either side, and then the clip just is affixed by a threaded hole down the middle of that barrel. Very simple, very elegant, very effective. Oh, by the way, I think I skipped by the weight because it's an issue. We got a 3 5/16 inch bladed high-end carry EDC knife that weighs 6.3 ounces. Wow. Let's put that in perspective, guys. A small Sebenza with a 3-inch blade weighs about 2.5 ounces. A large Sebenza with about a 3 5/8 inch blade weighs 4.7 ounces. This weighs 6.3 ounces. It is pretty to look at, even if you're like me and you don't have an eye for Ken Onion designs, and I don't. This one still is rather stunning to look at, which is what attracted me to it in the first place. But guys, for a blade profile that is slicer, which this is, we start with a 200 thousandths thick slab of Sleipner and then slap on some really thick slabs of titanium that are milled out. There's this swale in each of them, which I would imagine makes them pretty thin through the middle. But the knife is just plain heavy. Really, really heavy. What would we call it? An overbuilt high-end EDC knife? Not sure what the purpose for overbuilt high-end EDC knife would be, but well, guys, let's just talk about that a minute. The high-end overbuilt EDC knife, and in communications and repartee away from YouTube and Instagram, some of my closer online friends and I talk about this and snicker about it a lot. Let's face it. Well-marketed pocket jewelry without much function would cover knives of this class. We jokingly like to refer to them as knives that appeal to mall ninjas with money. People who appreciate buzzwords, the words of the day in the cutlery industry, like IKBS, like flipper, like insanely early lockup, overbuilt. Folks who have their triggers tripped by those terms buy this knife or ones like it. For me, as sort of a pragmatist in my old age, in my late 40s, I look at it as an envelope design, meaning its overall appearance from 3 feet, as something that looks like a pretty sweet, well-manufactured slicer, but then when you turn it over and look at its thickness and you pick it up and hold it in your hand and you put it in your pocket and it pulls your pants down, you think, why? I'm not going to use this in a without rule of law situation when society ceases to function as a survival knife. I'm not going to stab anybody with it. I'm not going to pry up manhole covers with this beautifully contoured piece of Italian art. So why do we have to make it weigh 6.3 ounces? Well, because that sells knives in 2015, doesn't it? Okay, let's move along after that bit of editorializing. I'm talk about this design some more, just with my own history. I was introduced to Ken Onion designs like most normal people, not by his customs, but by his collaborations with Kershaw. I was an owner of a couple scallions, a couple leeks, had most of the other ones in my hands at least to sharpen them. Loved them. Organic shapes, slim, svelte, lightweight designs, and I could live with a recurve here and there, even though I don't love them. Even then, didn't love them because they were innovative and they were lightweight and they were strong for their weight and they sliced well. And I became sort of a Ken Onion fan. And then, for me at least, the wheels came off at the inception of zero tolerance knives, those ZT Onion Strider collaborations, the 300 series of knives. I thought Ken Onion sort of lost his soul in that series because although they were shaped like onion knives, they were built more or weighed more like a Strider knife, and I just didn't think it was a great collaboration. The 300, the 301, 302, 350 series knives. They're not great cutters, and they aren't great examples, I think, of Ken Onion's work. And frankly, in a lot of ways, this knife reminds me more of those than it does a leek or a scallion or a chive or a shallot, which I think is a little bit of a sad thing. Now, I was excited when I saw that Ken Onion was sort of leaving Kershaw and joining forces with CRKT, because some of the early inexpensive CRKT offerings with Ken Onion's design elements I thought were really cool, sort of a return to his roots in production knives. The Ripple comes to mind in several configurations. You can buy them anywhere between $30 and $120 depending on the materials used and the country of origin. And what a sweet little knife. Svelte little slicer, great flipping mechanism. IKBS bearings for under 30 bucks, and I think a ball bearing pivot in a super lightweight EDC blade is a perfectly fine application. You're not dependent on those bearings to be super strong over the long term. You just want a slickly operating little gents folder, and the Ripple is that. This knife, I think, is kind of disappointing because it's a 6.3 ounce, 3 5/16 inch blade. So before we move on, why do I have it? Well, I kind of watched these as they were for sale, and I didn't buy one. And I watched my buddy Brett on Instagram try to sell this knife, I think 2 different times, and didn't pull the trigger. You know, it was a little over $300 used, and didn't know if I was going to like it, so it didn't sell. And a couple weeks ago, or a week ago or so, he had a raffle. And it was a good raffle. It was 18 spots, 20 bucks a spot, and I bought 2 spots. And the reason I thought it was worth 40 bucks to to maybe get a knife I wasn't going to like was because also offered in the raffle was a Rick Hinder Investigator pen in matte stainless. Obviously I won the raffle, huh? So I thought, you know, with a Hinder pen, you know, even if I hate the knife, I paid 20 bucks less than the cost of a Hinder pen. How can that be wrong? Can I afford to lose 40 bucks if I win nothing? Yeah. So I made a rare exception to my no gambling rule for myself, and it worked out. Not only that, not only did we get the pen, also got a pretty slick little Timex Indiglo wristwatch. Didn't expect that. Thank you, Brett. And one of my favorite things, and my favorite Victorinox accessory, is the factory Victorinox lanyard. It's the perfect length to attach to your Swiss Army knife to be able to find it in your pocket and extract it. It's awesome. Got a few of these Knife Thursday business cards with a little to-do list grid on the back. Gave me several of these. Got one posted on the wall behind the sharpening bench. And then, how about this? You guys who follow me on Instagram probably also follow Brett. A Christmas card. There's Brett and Lisa. That's Lisa May on Instagram. Brett's beautiful wife. And the coolest dog on Instagram, Tank. So thank you, Brett, Lisa, and Tank for all the goodies. And thanks for the card. It's awesome. So now, let's finish talking about the knife. So you guys kind of know why I was interested in it, and you kind of know some of the prejudices that I have coming into it. So let's talk about, after a day of not much cutting, but a lot of gripping, opening, closing, and analysis, what do I think about it? Okay. I think aesthetically it's a beautiful knife to look at. It looks like it would be very comfortable. It looks like the blade shape would be very functional for EDC tasks. And it looks like it's very slickly and precisely made. Sadly, looks can be deceiving. And most of you guys who have been around and been interested in Lionsteel's knife manufacturing over the last couple of years know they've had some fits and starts, and they've had some lapses in quality. There were issues with the DPX Hest knife that they made for Robert Young Pelton. There were issues with the Spyderco Lion Spy. There have even been some issues with their SR1s and SR1As. And this knife, frankly, has some issues. Some manufacturing defects and some design elements that I really have a hard time understanding why they made it from drawing to production without being killed in the prototyping stage. But let's kind of talk about those things. First of all, look at the flipper. I'm going to try to get a good macro of this so you can see. It's nice and low profile. It's well located. But can you see? Let me hold up a piece of paper. maybe this will show. Can you see the sharpness? There you go. On the end of that flipper. It's like they really didn't have a plan for the jimping on the flipper, how it was going to work and how it was going to affect your finger in prolonged use. And guys, it shreds the index finger. It just does. And it's also sharp on the side corners. So if your finger's not pulling straight back and you get over here on the side corners at all, it's just a killer. And it's not cutting me, but I don't know if you can. Both my index finger pads, because I've switched it from hand to hand because it hurts so much. I suppose when you get used to it, you'd learn to grip it and flip it in a way that wouldn't be so painful, but there is no reason for that sharply jimped corner to be, can you hear that? It's bad, guys. Randy Johnson, Solo's Knife Reviews, has a couple videos on a modded one, and he took that point off, and I will do that as well. It does flip okay once you get used to it. It's not what I would call a superb flipper. It's an okay flipper. Another thing that bothers me is when you close the knife, and I'm going to do it right-handed just to show you that it's not just a lefty issue. You put your thumb in a natural position through the thumb relief against the lock bar. You release the lock, you bring the blade forward, and I'm not clear of the detent, so you have to snap it past the detent ball. I hate that. It always feels like I'm ripping the detent ball out of the hole. There it is again. Okay. Left-handed. There it is. How hard would it... Here's what you have to do to not make that happen. You have to bring your thumb way back on the lock bar, back to here, and then it closes. But, let's look at the design of the lock bar. Where are the index points for releasing it? Well, they're way up here. You use those, you're not even close to getting past that ball. Bad design. And here's another in the same area. Why did we do this? Why is the lock bar so much higher through here than the access side? First of all, this would have made a beautifully comfortable finger groove for gripping the knife. Instead, we have a rather sharp, rather narrow piece of titanium sticking up right in the middle of the finger groove. And can you hear this? Let's see. When you're gripping the knife hard, you hear and feel the lock bar move in either hand. That is unsettling. If you're gripping the knife hard, you're probably gripping it hard for a reason. And to feel that lock bar move, it's unnerving. It doesn't feel secure. And it probably isn't helping the wear of the lock face of the titanium to have it not locked up well and moving in your grip. Don't like it. I think if this scale were contoured like this scale, there's plenty of room in there to get your thumb in. That you don't need to have almost 3/16 of an inch of lock bar sticking up in this access to release the lock. You could just put your thumb right down in the middle, find the corner. You just don't need it, and it makes the grip bad. It's bad in a saber grip. It's not so bad in a hammer grip. It's really bad in a draw cut grip. That may be a modification that gets made to that knife. We might take this recessed area right out of there, come down about to this corner, and then we're going to stonewash this blade. The next flaw we'll talk about, I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but I think you can see it. The milling in the swale. It is very uniform, just a tiny little radius, repeated over and over, milled straight down that cavity. Looks the same on both sides. On the show scale, it looks the same front to back. On the lock side scale, you can see it's pretty uniform here at the back, and then you move forward, and what's going on here? You guys see the difference? It's like now we've got wide, narrow, wide, narrow, wide, narrow, whereas back here we're nice and uniform. Frankly, it's kind of doesn't look so good for a knife that costs almost $400. And then let's get to probably the most glaring defect on the knife. Hope you can see this. Can you see how the satin grind of the spine of the blade does not meet the jimping in a uniform fashion on that very far forward jimping notch? First of all, the finish in the roots of each jimping notch is pretty bad, and then it's just not finished on the tops of the notches. And the width of the last notch is very narrow on the left side, very wide on the right side. And I looked at this knife for hours trying to figure out why that was, and the reason is, I don't know if the camera's going to show this well, but the spine of the blade is ground not perpendicular with the blade, it's ground at a slight angle. So that spine isn't ground, it's not ground perpendicular, it's ground at an angle like that. And it's kind of noticeable. Not only does it make this last jimping notch look a little weird, there's actually a little spot of no cleanup right there. I think you can see that. It's a $400 knife, and it's a pretty noticeable thing. You know, if you're gonna make a decision to compete in this area of the market against Striders and Hinderers and Sabenzas, you better bring it from a quality standpoint. And frankly, Lionsteel didn't bring it. Also, this is pretty typical with a 2014, 2015 bearing flipper frame lock knife. Everybody likes them to be such great flippers, so we like to have very little lock bar tension. I'm breaking that loose with barely pushing on it. We like super early lockup. I don't know why. First of all, when you get a 200 thousandths thick blade, you're never going to have enough wear to go from 10% to 90% lockup in the life of the knife. And that lock would be traveling like 150 thousandths across, and there's not even enough tension on the lock bar to get it halfway across anyway. You know, why not set the lock bar so it engages 50%, you know, between 40 and 60% with lots of tension, so the knife is secure. I'll just hold this in my left hand and give it a little twist, and oh, there it goes. How about that? Hold it firmly in my left hand, pry against something a little bit, and oh, there it goes. Just oh, there it goes. You'll not do that with your Sabenza, guys. Right hand, oh, there, breaks it loose. Frankly, why have a locking knife? If that's going to be how you do it. Again, this big web here sticking up into the finger groove exacerbates that problem. If these two scales were flush in the finger groove, that wouldn't be an issue. So, is it a nice piece of pocket jewelry if nobody looks at it too closely? Yeah, it is. Is it a well-made knife with high quality and good engineering? No. So what are we going to do about this? Well, here's what we're going to do. Oh, by the way, plunge grind issues. The plunge grind of the knife stops about here. They did a nice job with some kind of a manual operation, though, thinning out that heel, although we've still got a nice little point and a little bit of a broadening edge. I like this little sway back right here, and I think it would be really effective if I could grip the knife like this. So we're going to cut a forward finger choil on this knife. We're going to remove this part of the lock bar that doesn't need to be there. We are going to round off this flipper tab, and I'm either going to try to true up that jimping and make it look right. If I can't, I'm going to get rid of it altogether, because when the knife is closed, I think it would actually look better gone. When it's open, it's kind of funky anyway. It starts sunken into the handle and then rises up. Don't know how that's going to look if I remove it. It doesn't really look so sleek now. So I'm going to do all that work, and then I'm going to send this knife off to Toad Sticker, I believe, and he is going to stone wash the blade and the frame. That will that'll kind of refinish the area where I work the frame, and I think the knife will look really good stone washed anyway. Get rid of the billboard, which I really hate on this particular knife. And then I'm going to have Toad Sticker send it down to One All's Pub, have him put an edge on it, and both those guys will do videos, reviews, and to tell you about the progress they're making with the knife. Then we'll probably send it to the most anal knife guy we know, the king of cutlery OCD, Campfire Talk, to have him look at the knife, do a video on it, and critique our work, and then it'll come home. And then you and I will take a look at the finished product together. But for now, it's got issues. So let's set about making it better. We'll see if we can make it a knife that deserves the cost of admission. That's all for today, guys. Have a great 2015, and stay tuned for the rest of the story on the CRKT Ken Onion Hi Jinx. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, and remember, the Word is sharp.